David Brewster here with a new episode of Chordplay. This is the Chords of Black and Blue, and I've had some requests to feature some of Black and Blue's music, and we're talking about Tommy Thayer's old band, and this is way before Kiss. And Black and Blue formed in Portland, Oregon in 1981, and they kind of played around that area, relocated to Southern California, and by 1983, they had a record deal with Geffen, released their first album in '84, their self-titled debut, followed that with an album called Without Love, and they actually toured with Kiss in support of that album in 1985. That would have been Kiss's Asylum tour, which we technically just looked at that in the Bruce Kulick, Three for All episode. Interesting. And then Black and Blue continued after that. A very interesting band. Tommy's an interesting guitarist with an interesting history. And even though Black and Blue never had a huge hit, they weren't like Bon Jovi or Whitesnake, there's definitely some really cool guitar work, hiding this episode. So here we go. So as far as Tommy Thayer is concerned, his career actually started around 1978, which is around the time he graduated high school and helped form an early version of Black and Blue, which they officially formed in '81, but around '78 he was kind of putting the band together with vocalist Jamie St. James. And he's done a lot more than work with Black and Blue and Kiss. He actually appears on Doro's second solo album, and Black and Blue actually has a song that appears in the film Vision Quest. And then Tommy had a hand behind the scenes with soundtracks for films like The Stoned Age and Bad Channels and Life with Mikey, Stealing Harvard, and some films like that. And I'm a huge Ace Frehley fan, but I respect Tommy and the work he's done with Kiss. And I know there's some Ace fans out there that don't like Tommy, but in my opinion, Tommy had a job to do, and he totally did it. So I did a little bit of digging for this episode to try to find when Tommy and Gene kind of first crossed paths. And like I mentioned earlier, Black and Blue toured with Kiss in 1985. Kiss was on the Asylum tour, Black and Blue was on the Without Love tour. And I'm guessing that's when their two worlds kind of collided. And then I think they kind of, stayed in touch. Eventually Gene Simmons produced two Black and Blue albums, the album Nasty Nasty and the album In Heat. And then I think I read somewhere eventually Tommy became Gene's personal assistant. And then when Ace really kind of fell out of the reformed version of Kiss, then Tommy stepped in with the makeup and took over. And the rest is history. So the music and chord-based examples in this episode came from 4 Black and Blue albums, and technically they released 5 studio albums, 2 live albums, and a handful of compilations, but we're going to basically stick with the 80s releases, those original 4 they released. They did release a 5th album, I think it was in 2011, but we're not going to go there. We're going to stick in the 80s, and there's actually some really interesting chord work and rhythm guitar parts hiding in this episode, so here we go. So with the opening, that's Hold On to 18 from the first Black and Blue album, and that's their biggest hit, even though it's not a huge hit. It's not really a household song, but I do remember that tune. I remember the video getting played on MTV a little bit. In the intro, you could definitely hear the MXR clone looper here. That's actually the bass part. The bass is just playing the open A. Right? That's all the looper was doing, and then the guitar comes in like this. But a cool riff, and you got that open A from the bass, and then the first time through it's real quiet, so it's just an A to a D power chord, and then a G to an A power chord like that, and I'm just doing the one finger, mute the A, open D and G, like that. It could be a fretted G5, but I just kind of, for whatever reason, prefer to do it that way, like into that A, like that. Here, it's an F over C to a C power chord, right, like that, and then C to G, and there I'm doing the G with that one finger with the open strings again, and then you hear it get loud right there. And then that first pass when it's loud, then you hear this, G, A to D tag, G to A, that F to C, and the last last time it's a G power chord to an E right there. So a really simple riff, but that's a cool song, and I like that kind of, you know, just ringing power chord moment. I'm a huge fan of that. Next up's the song The Strum Rock. This also came from the first Black and Blue album, and this is really simple. It's just ringing power chords again. But the first pass, it's ringing and kind of slower, and then the second pass, it starts kind of picking up some momentum, like this. So it starts with that E, B to E power chord, and just let it ring the first time. That ring. And then C to G, and this time I am doing the fretted, you know, power chord. You could play around with that open string, kind of one finger version if you wanted to, but I'm just hopping the power chord over. And then you hear a D to an A to a D5 over A, like that big D5 down there. B action. So after that first pass, when it's just kind of ringing and slower, then it kind of picks up some speed, and it's the same thing, just played a little bit, you know, faster, like this. Next up's the song Live It Up. This came from the album In Heat, and this is interesting. Tommy's finger picking and plucking the strings for this chord part during the intro and verse, and there's an effect in play here. And I'm guessing it's some sort of phaser, could be a flanger, but I'm using the MXR Phase 95 on the 45 setting without the script logo, so just the regular blue setting. And it's something like this. So it starts with this A5, and you're really just plucking the D and the G together, like that. So just grab that A and that E note, do that 3 times plucked, and then you're going to go back to this little D over A right there. Just bar the 7th fret on the D and the G string, do that twice, and then go back to that A5 again, and do that 3 times, like that. Do the exact same thing down a whole step. You know, now it's G5 and that little part of C right there. Right, like that. And right there it's a D over F sharp like that, and do that 8 times. And then right there go back to the C over G right there and do that 8 times. Loop that whole progression, and that's the intro and verse part. Cool guitar part. Next up's the song Action. This came from the first Black and Blue album, and this is interesting. There's 2 guitars here, and the first guitar is really just playing this D unison right here. And that's it. You just hear that fretted D with the open D string, kind of muted lightly in the background, just play it over and over and over, and that's the intro, technically. So I'm obviously going to loop that part with the MXR clone looper, and then a second guitar comes in with these twisting chords over that sustained D note. You know, something like this. Something like that. So over that sustained D, you're hearing the second guitar play this huge, you know, D5 over A, an open position right there. Follow that with a B flat power chord, B flat 5. And right there, it's a G over B. So that B note, G and B like that. And then the next chord, I'm hearing it like this. That's an F5 over C. So it's a 4-chord progression over that D. D5, B flat 5, a G over B, and then an F5 over C. Like that. Riffs like that where it has this ominous kind of building sound, and you can't help but think, like, what's getting ready to happen next? Next up's the song Rules. This came from the album Nasty Nasty, and once again we have 2 guitar parts here, and I'm going to use the MXR clone looper to kind of recreate this. So the first guitar part is playing what I'm going to call the black and blue alarm clock, and it looks and sounds like this. Chords here, just little 2-note, you know, chords and little partial chords, but it starts with E5, this E and B note together like that. You're going to raise that 5th, so it's implied augmented, you know, or sharp 5 right there. And reach back and grab this A note, now it's an implied E sus4 like that. Go back to that B note twice with that E note together. And then G sharp with that E note, so that's E major right there at the end twice. And then you loop it like this. Guitar comes in and plays on top of that. So that's the part I'm going to loop with the MXR clone looper. So here's guitar 1, and I'm going to add guitar 2. So it's pretty basic, and then over the alarm clock, you're going to basically play this E or a D to an E power chord like that. And just start pummeling that low E open, and then it's a G over B to a C power chord like that, and then do the low E open again. And it's an A over C sharp to a D power chord like that. So that first part. And right there, go to an A power chord, a single B note, and grab this C note there on the 3rd fret, and then play the open D and the open G with it, like that. And then you repeat all that again. Hits that low E. So you put all that together and you got something like this. guitar parts that come together and they create this other part. You know, really cool. Last but not least is the song Strange Things. This came from the album Without Love, and this is just a clean guitar part. It's pretty simple, just picking through some chords. But I like guitar parts like this. It's interesting to see what different guitarists do with just a handful of chords, like this. Right there. So there's A minor, and you're kind of opening up that B string to an A sus2 like this. Right? So you're kind of picking through the chord, and you start with the open A string, and you're going to basically do that pull off. Like that. And the second chord, it's kind of like an A minor 7, like that, like open up that G. But he's doing... basically slide the C up to a D with the open D and G strings. Like that. And that's kind of weird because you're doing that pull off to the open B and then you follow that with that slide. It kind of happens, kind of quick like that. And then you hear him pick through that A minor to a G over B to a C, and you're kind of playing with that open B like a C major 7 implied to a D5 right there. Just kind of strum it, and then A minor to an F major right here, and then E major right there. And you start playing with the sus4, the A note, and then you kind of run through that again like this. Simple guitar part, but like I said, I like to see what guitarists do when they start picking through, chords and slow songs and ballads and stuff like that, because you really can't wow everybody with your flash and shreddy licks. You have to figure out something else to do in songs like that. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with this look at the chords of Black and Blue, and I want to thank the viewers out there that requested, this episode. And honestly, I'd never dove into Black and Blues music like this before. I'd never learned or, really practiced any of their songs before. And I remembered the band, I remembered the name, I recognized a couple album covers when I was putting this together, but I'd never really went there for whatever reason. And I do remember like when Ace left Kiss, like the reformed Kiss, and then suddenly there was this different guy, filling his role. And I'm an Ace guy, I'm a huge Ace Frehley fan. At first I didn't like it. I was like, well, who's this guy wearing Ace's makeup and his costumes and playing his licks? But then I realized, after I kind of dove in and kind of studied who Tommy is, it was like, oh, he played in Black and Blue. Gene Simmons produced that band. Oh, he was Gene's, personal assistant. So it kind of made sense as far as what happened when Ace left and Tommy stepped in. And in my opinion, like I just said, I'm a huge Ace fan. And if Ace isn't going to do it for whatever reason, then I'd rather have somebody like Tommy, come in there and do it. Because in my opinion, he's been very authentic and very respectful as far as the licks and the look and the sound and everything. And yeah, he's kind of done some things his way, but he has been very dedicated and loyal to, Ace's image and the licks and all that stuff. And I'm impressed by that. So even though, there's nothing better than Ace Frehley, you can get pretty darn close with somebody like Tommy Thayer. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.